I'm not a big stat guy, but I ran across this, and I want to read this to you. What it says is, when fathers are involved during pregnancy, mothers are 1.5 more times more likely to receive prenatal care in the first trimester, which has positive implications for both maternal and infant health. And this is stuff that you guys already know. But then it also goes and says that despite this evidence, fathers still face significant barriers to involvement, including systemic obstacles related to employment and lack of confidence, stemming from social stereotypes about the expected role of a father, namely that their role is somehow secondary to mothers. And then the last part that I want to read, it says, fathers' involvement during the newborn period is strongly associated with marital status. Look at this. It says 40% of births are from unmarried couples, which has been accompanied by an increase in the number of non-resident fathers. Although many unmarried couples are cohabiting at the time of their child's birth, recent studies show that 63% of unmarried fathers are no longer living with the mother and their child after 5 years. These non-resident fathers have less contact and involvement with their children than do the resident fathers. And so when we read and hear stuff like that, we have to be honest about, regardless of our position, right, of what we think about families being married or not married. This is not something that we can just overlook when we are working with families, right? Because if this is a barrier, we can't just, in the work that we do, just because something is difficult and something is hard, it's not okay for us just to act like it doesn't exist. I'll say it again. Just because it's difficult and hard, it's not okay for us to just act like it doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is that when we work with some of the families, and I know sometimes it's hard to have certain conversations, right? Because it's like, we don't want to go past that line. Because who am I to talk about your relationship status with this individual? Right? It can be very difficult. But if we're really talking about making true impact, we have to be very creative in ways to really deal with the root issue. So just this past week, at my center, we had, yesterday was the last cohort, but last week I invited somebody who's a dear friend of mine who works for the state, who does domestic violence work, trains a lot of people across the state. So I said, you know what? I would love for you to come and speak to the men that I work with, right? And so I respect her; she's amazing. And so it was awesome, right? Because I wasn't there. And so the very next day, before I left, I already told the men what was going to happen. I set the stage, but I had to leave because I wanted to be an involved dad. My daughter was having an event, so I had to be there. So the next day, I called her, and I was like, yo, how was it? She said it was horrible. This wasn't 20 years ago. This was last week. She said it was horrible. What do you mean it was horrible? And she went on to say how the men wasn't really listening to her, how every time she brought something about DV, how they were pushing back and started talking about the system and how they were victimized and all of that, right? And so she left out of there, and my facilitator supported her. But when she left, she was like, Sean, I don't know. She was like, and this was the beautiful thing about it, because her and I have a great relationship. What she said to me, she said, I sat there and I had to question myself and said, man, is my bias kicking in? Do I see race kicking in? She said, because I'm surrounded by all of these black men, I'm the only female, not only female, but the only white female in this space. And she said, man, all of these emotions is going through me when I'm in there. She said, man, I felt unsafe at a point. And so two things could be true at the same time. And so we started talking, and one of the things I had to do, I had to own that I really didn't set the stage for her to come in, because a lot of times we don't have outsiders come, right? And this is going to my point where I said, just because it's difficult, we don't avoid. Just because it's difficult, we don't avoid. And so we begin to continue to have the conversation. And I said, you know what, I own my part. That I really should set the stage a little bit better so that way when you walked into that space, they would have been ready. But then she had to own hers of, man, my biases. How do I view these black men? Because in a lot of places that this individual go, she is very well received, embraced, loved upon. But now she's in an environment where there's pushback. And so it was very important that when we got done with our conversation, that we both agreed that, you know what, it was great for both of us, but it was really important for her to learn as well that when she comes to spaces and when she's looking at black men, like, man, maybe we need to be mindful and really intentional about some of our own biases. And so I had a conversation with the men just yesterday, and this was the thing, right? I came in there, we had the conversation, and brought it up, and they had a whole different perspective of what took place. But we still held them accountable because the facilitator who was there last week was like, no, you were saying this, and you were saying that. So us as an agency, we had to hold them accountable because this was really happening. Is that there were some men in that room who were batterers. That were batterers and didn't want to be called out. And the lady, she didn't call them out. But she was hitting some triggers on them. And they said, Shon, well, they said, I didn't come here for that. I know you didn't come here for that. You came here because you wanted to reconnect with your children. But I told you, and I asked you in the beginning, are you willing to pay a price to get your children back? To reconnect? You was the one that signed up and said, yep, I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do. And so if that's the case, I'm going to bring people before you like that. Because guess what? None of you in this room are mandated to do IPV work. But I know the responsibility of our agency of reconnecting, that some of you in this room are batterers. It is not documented. It is my responsibility to have these difficult conversations. And so when we're talking about doing the work that we are doing, we have to learn how and do a better job at weaving the family unit together. I get it. I know that a lot of us, the main focus is mom and baby. But I'm telling you, that was my mindset when I was just working with fathers. Because all I cared about was this father getting access to his child. But for me, it was irresponsible when I started to look. I'm like, man, I'm giving this guy an attorney. I'm helping this guy with all these resources. And then what happens when he reconnects? What if she was just running away? And then here I use my resources to put her back in harm's way. So as an agency, I had to become responsible and think outside the box as a fatherhood agency to say, you know what? I need mom to walk alongside me. Mom, we're not going to give this guy any service until we have a conversation with you. What does this look like? How do we alongside together, Mom. Because it's important for us to weave these bridges together. When we're talking about having success with birthing outcomes, we have to definitely, listen, I know you guys know it because I'm preaching to the choir. But I'm just hoping that I just say something just a little bit different on what we've been receiving, right? Because I don't want to be the same. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. I understood, like, okay, you give him access. So then what we wind up doing was starting a supervised visitation center. Because I'm like, man, if you're going to get access, you may not be safe. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a safe place here at our agency for you to reconnect on purpose with purpose in a safe environment. And so that way we can help you model these behaviors. That when you show up, you have the tools, you have the resources so that you can be successful in what you do.